We are here for a seminar on reclaiming trans rights in India, unsettling patriarchy, question mark. But just to say welcome, this is a seminar on, as I said, reclaiming trans rights in India, unsettling patriarchy, question mark. So as you will all be aware, that India has indeed had a rich cultural tradition of gender fluidity, and the transgender community has been nevertheless stigmatized as a criminal tribe through colonial-era laws. Now, of course, the community has struggled over the years to overcome this discrimination, and only after significant engagement with the judiciary, where they finally counted in the population census in 2011, for example. We'll hear more about this, but the problems of discrimination remain. The trans community has seen little change and still face discrimination in everyday life. And this is really what this seminar is about, contemplating also what can be done about this. We have three guests today. First of all, Jashudra Dasgupta, who has worked over 30 years and has experience of issues of gender, rights, and health, strengthening leadership of marginalized communities in terms of rights claiming. She's co-founded 4 feminist organizations in India and led one of them, Shayog, which many of you know about, for over a decade. So Jashudra has served as an academic on various academic and government committees, received several fellowships, and is currently an independent feminist researcher, in particular working with Center for Health and Social Justice in India, which I'll come on to. Now, Santosh Gidi, she's a founder and executive director of the transgender organization colonial-era. Santosh has extensive experience in facilitating workshops and trainings on the community's issues of health, sex, and sexuality, as well as gender, human rights, sexual health, and engaging with men and boys to stop gender-based violence. In fact, colonial-era has been working with CHSJ and IDS for many years. Back in 2010, we were working on a program called Mobilizing Men in Practice, and we have a nice picture of a colonial-era event in this report, which I would warmly recommend to everyone. Not only that, I can also add that she's the first transgender activist working on issues faced by women and girls, as well as engaging men and boys in gender justice, working on issues related to empowering women, combating trafficking, and with campaigns such as Zero Tolerance, Stop Gender-Based Violence, Right to Food, 1 Billion Rising, 16 Days of Activism, Fortnight of Activism, and so on. So welcome, Santosh. So, and then thirdly, we have Akshay Khanna. Now, Akshay Khanna is a social anthropologist, theater practitioner, and amateur chef based in New Delhi. And I can warmly recommend Akshay's cooking, which I've partaken of myself many years back, when we also have a working relationship going back to being a former IDS fellow, like myself. Actually, and I worked on this event called Undressing Patriarchy. I like the undressing. It's kind of resonant with unsettling patriarchy in this event. And we were doing lots of workshopping with nice little flip charts and so on. So that's going back in history. We're all friends and relations for a long time. Its first book, actually his first book, length ethnography, which is called Sexualness, from 2016, tells the story of the queer movement in India and its entanglement with law and epidemiology in particular. I'll never forget a seminar when I actually spoke of the emergence of the anus, which was a great phrase. Okay. It is currently the co-director of Wrapped Research, Activism, Performance, and Theatre, a project that's developed theatre as a method of research. and which works with community groups, researchers, and projects in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the UK, I should add. Then finally, you have myself. I am the host of this meeting. I'm Jurker Edström, an IDS fellow since 2006, a former MPhil student at IDS in the 1980s, and I'm also the program convener for Countering Backlash, Reclaiming Gender Justice, which is the program hosting this event. I lead a stream called the Patriarchy Strand, this is a 6-year program working in 6 countries to understand and counter global backlash against gender justice for all. One of those countries, of course, is India, along with Bangladesh, Lebanon, Kenya, Uganda, and Brazil. Now in India, we work with Center for Health and Social Justice, where Dasgupta is working with, as well as Gender at Work. So with those introductions having been made, I'll remind everybody that this is a recorded session in case anybody has concerns about that. And I'm muting all. And I will be now handing over, this format will be Jashodra, Santosh, and Akshay will be speaking for about 10 to 7 minutes each. Sorry, 7 to 10 minutes each, obviously. And then we'll have a Q&A discussion following that. I'll now hand over to, first of all, Jashodra, who will be explaining the background, what these video, you'll be hearing about a range of videos that have been made and that will be launched, why they were shot, and what they will be used for. So over to you, Jashodra, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Jurker. And thank you everyone who has joined us today, and welcome to this discussion. I hope this is going to be a really interactive discussion, and would really love to hear everyone's responses to what we are putting out. So just to give a bit of background, I'm currently a researcher, as Jurker explained, and I'm engaged in a participatory action research effort with the Transgender Collective in Kolkata in India. And I'm very fortunate that my colleague from this collective, Santosh, is here with us today on this panel. So I've been working on the Countering Backlash program as a consultant researcher for a little over 2 years. And the idea really is, as being part of the feminist movements in India, the idea was really to try and understand what we see as backlash against the gender justice agenda and what are possible strategies to counter it. Just to kind of begin with, I felt that normally when we talk of gender justice, most of us think in terms of the gender binary. And it's always like either women or men and so on. But I was keen to kind of push that boundary a bit and to also try and sort of understand the more gender fluid domains and what kind of backlash against gender justice is being faced by communities such as the transgender community. And fortunately, I have been volunteering and researching with this particular collective over the last 2.5 years. And that's how we began to work together on this. So this year, the collective Kolkata Rishta and a host of others, we sort of took part in an action research methodology workshop early this year. And we tried to define what would be the area of inquiry that would actually enable us to understand how backlash is operating for this community. And so this collective actually defined what would be their research question for these 2 years. So here, I just want to give a little bit of a background before I explain the research question. And that is that in India, there has been a decades-old struggle of the LGBTIQ community for gender justice. And we have been struggling against colonial-era laws like Section 377 and other laws that, for instance, criminalize the transgender community as being a criminal tribe. Years of struggle and several cases in courts, both the state courts as well as the Honorable Supreme Court of India, have finally led to a judgment, which we call NALSA in short, which is basically the National Legal Services Authority, which had put in a petition into the Supreme Court. So the NALSA judgment, I think, was a very, very progressive judgment in which the court kind of actually accepted that the constitutional rights to life, to dignity and autonomy can actually be interpreted to say that it includes the right to one's own gender identity and sexual orientation. And this was absolutely path-breaking. And it finally culminated in a series of processes which ended in the passing of a law, the Transgender Protection of Rights Act. And this was actually passed in December 2019. So it's kind of been a journey, and the NALSA judgment and the Transgender Act are actually seen as, significant steps that have been taken in India. So this collective, when it was reflecting on how it would like to understand the backlash that they are facing against their struggles for gender justice, they defined their research question as, how can we make the NALSA judgment and the Transgender Act more useful for our community, especially in terms of building an enabling environment, access to services that are respectful, and in enabling us to assert our identity as a transgender community. So their effort was really trying to understand how this legal kind of progress could translate into some progress, some change, some transformation regarding their own situation. And in this, the first step that this collective undertook, in which I was also a part, was really to try and understand at which level change has actually taken place, given that more than 2 years have passed. And so in order to understand that, earlier this year, we were, we were engaged in doing a scoping study in which we had focus group discussions with various kinds of members from the transgender community to try and understand whether they felt there was any change. And we also had key informant interviews with some of the key stakeholders, especially in the health department, in the HIV/AIDS control departments, and also with the police department. This scoping study actually was quite an eye-opener, and the kind of things that emerged seemed really important to share, not just with the trans community themselves, but also with the stakeholders, because some of the information was really telling. For instance, it's been more than 2.5 years since the law was passed, but none of the sort of duty bearers have actually undergone any kind of orientation or training programs on what is now expected of them as they deal with the transgender community. So fundamentally, everybody who is a duty bearer is clueless about what the law is actually asking them to do. In order to bring out these experiences from the focus group discussions, there was the option of bringing out like an academic report. But I think it was more important to have a way of communicating with the transgender community themselves, most of whom have not actually completed their education. And you will find out why when you watch the videos that bring out their testimonies. So these videos are fundamentally a way of expressing what the community experiences today, 2.5 years after the law was passed, apparently to protect their rights, and what they are facing, what they are struggling with, even as recently as during the COVID pandemic. So their experiences are in these 3 testimonies that you will see in the videos. And I'm hoping most of you who are here today have actually watched the videos. They're just, a total of 12 minutes with 3 testimonies of 4 minutes each. And I think they bring out really the struggles that the community members have been facing and which Santosh will talk more about. So just to wrap up, we have actually begun a process of using these videos as part of the strategy to counter the backlash. And so one of the things we did roughly about 6 weeks ago was actually to have a dialogue with the stakeholders in which many members of the transgender community were present. And we invited the police department, the health department, the HIV prevention program officials, as well as people from the jail department and so on, to come and watch the videos, listen to the voices of the community members, see their artwork, their posters, their self-expression, and try to begin a dialogue. And I think we've made a good step. I'd like to stop here, and I will come back later when there are questions. Thank you, Yeka.
Well, thank you, Yashodhara. That was perfect timing. And not only that, it was great background. I think we have a much better sense now. So everybody will have seen, or you may have seen that Ben shared the links to the videos in the chat line. The videos made by Center for Health and Social Justice with colonial-era, of course, very much together. So can I now then hand over to Santosh? Giri, if you would, or Giri, forgive my pronunciation if that's wrong. You have 7 to 10 minutes, Santosh. Thank you very much. You need to, yeah, you're.
Thank you, Yarkur, and thank you, IDS, for creating this enabling platform for the transgender people to share their reality, their own voices, which is very much important today. Because why I'm saying today, because we are, I as Santosh, working for the last 20 years in colonial-era, and as a founder, I understand that what is the need of today for more discussion and to more interaction about the transgender people. As Yashodhara says that the 3 videos, I think it's better and it will be more helping you people to understand what we are going to say, because that video shows the reality. And the reality of the 3 trans persons, those who are from the 3 different backgrounds. One is from the dance teacher, one is from begging in the street, and one is from the sex worker, as a trans sex worker. So I think that is very important, that we want to, as we're planning to make this video, we say, Yashodhara, that it's better if you can be able to 3 dimensions of the reality should be there, and it is like that. So as we all knows that Nalsa judgment. I'm going to start it with the Nalsa judgment, because this judgment is really bringing transgenders people together to get the access of this judgment, like health, education, livelihood, and everything. Protections, but honestly speaking, it's not happening. And this is the backlash, that it is not happening after the judgment also. Because there are some conflict between the government, which is in central and as well as in state. Because as we are also running the Garima Griha, Garima Griha is a shelter home for the transgender, which is first time in India, which is implemented by colonial-era and other 10 organizations, and which is supported by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Ministry of India. But there is supposed to be the PMC, Project Management Committee, which is chaired by the deputy, which is chaired by the DM, a district magistrate, or any collector. Many of the places is formed except Kolkata. just because of that, because our central government and the state government is from the different backgrounds. So it's not happening. So in this hodgepodge, we are like grinding everywhere, like where to go, where not to go, what to do, what not to do. And after this judgment, which is we feel that it will be going to be help more to achieve our walk as well as our dream, because we always talk about that each dreams have, but our dreams also makes matter. So I think Yashodhara, if you can be later on, if you can be help to make that in English word, that amadero shopner dam ache. So that is very important, that how we want to see our dream, and that is not completed. So I think this space, like when we are talking about the scoping studies and all, and this is a study which is academic as well as the practicing. We are doing practitioners, so we are also involving in this research, and also we can get more idea from the grassroots level and also from the community from different backgrounds. So hoping, until now hoping that after this projects, we will going to be get some new ideas that what to do with the community and for the next few years or something to achieve the goals. I think which is very important that we have to give, it's I don't know, but I think it's a community voice that when we are talking, that this research is like giving a space for the community. So I think in future also, if we think about that, how and what is the program we could do, which is implemented by the community and with the community-based organization. So the independent way we can be able to flag the issue, to solve the issue, to dissolve the issue, and to reach the unreached population. So as of now, this much, I think why I'm stopping me here, because I'm eagerly waiting for the questions which might be from the participants, and which is also giving us more thought to work in futures. So thank you, Yarkar and others.
Well, thank you, Santosh. You did extremely well on time. So let me just pause my timer. I have a little timer here just to keep track of things. So just to say thank you. That was great to hear directly from you, and a bit more of insight into the 3 different videos and the background to this non-implementation and the non-realization of rights as being a symptom or proof, if you like, of backlash and resistance in India to trans rights. So that made me wonder kind of what is the difference between backlash and resistance, or inertia or reluctance. But with that question hanging in the room, I'll hand over to Akshay to perhaps reflect on, well, everything, but maybe include that question if you like. It seems relevant to the topic. So over to you, Akshay. Thank you very much, Santosh.
Thank you all for this opportunity to engage with this. My relationship with Kolkata Rishta actually goes back way beyond, and I'll start with when in 2005, as a young PhD research scholar, I had done a bit of my fieldwork in Kolkata, and a large part of that was with Kolkata Rishta, which was then an emergent group that was struggling to get resources from a highly competitive HIV/AIDS kind of industry space. And in those days, partly because of the HIV/AIDS, the dominance of the HIV/AIDS discourse, the main identity that that people used in terms of working class, now use the word trans. The term was Koti. Koti in HIV/AIDS language was translated as, was given meaning as, the working class, queer, male, usually penetrated in a same-sex sexual interaction kind of thing. And the fact of being penetrated was a central element of this of this identity category. And a lot of us have written about what that meant in terms of epidemiology, etc. Now, several years later, when I returned to Kolkata Rishta to work on a citizenship project, there was this strange thing where the term Kothi had all but disappeared. Okay? And I remember Santosh saying, in one of our sessions about how now we are all trans. Right? There is a way in which a particular local idiom of sexualness, right? It was a sexuality identity. The primary base was sexual practice and sexual desire, etc. Had been replaced or rather displaced by this new idiom of transgender. And transgender is very recent as a term, as a framework at a grassroots level in the Indian context. And this isn't a simple transition, right? This isn't a simple displacement. On the one hand, it is the desexualization of this entity of transgender, which in turn has gained a certain amount of respectability. And as Yashodhara was laying out, that there have been very significant shifts in the law and also in terms of an emergent system of governmentality that recognizes the rights and issues of welfare of transgender communities. So there is the emergence of a respectable trans figure that the government is attaching to, and this resonates also with the rise of the language of transgender in a global context, an international context. But what is being left behind in this transition is precisely the sexualness, or that which makes us human, as desiring beings, etc. So now you have, every time you have the emergence of a respectable figure, you have a reiteration of that which is undesirable. Right? So Kothi is now an abuse. Kothi is now, in everyday language, it is more an abuse as compared to transgender. Now, what I'm trying to put across here is that the local idiom, the community's idiom of self, of its mode of negotiating with the world, is coming under challenge. And there are 3 points that I want to raise very quickly in terms of the places from where the challenge is rising. The first is what I would call the emergence of an international trans police. Right? There's been a great profusion of language and activism around trans rights, which is very much within a Western framework, a Western imagination, which continues to be binary. How much ever we may talk about, the rise of the recognition of non-binary identities in the West, etc. At the heart of it, the trans discourse is that is emergent from the West, is very much a binary discourse. It is a discourse of transition rather than transcendence of the gender binary, and therefore there is a certain creation of an imagination of what it means to be transgender. Right? So there is the right way to be transgender, and at the same time there is a great restriction on the ability to have debate and dialogue around gender fluidity itself. So you have this, an international kind of space, which is of course linked to the geopolitics of funding, etc. And in some sense, a crisis of, one of the crises in feminism at a global scale as well. And that has implications for the material conditions under which one can do activism at a local level. If your funding is based on you being able to perform a certain kind of subjectivity, a certain kind of identity, it means erasure of your own idiom, right? So going back to the disappearance of the poetry. So that's one place from where there is a backlash, there is a challenge to working class trans discourse in the Indian context. The second is the ways in which activism and activist communities themselves are structured in terms of class and caste and religion, etc. So, for example, when the Transgender Rights Protection Act was first finalized, there was great protest around the country by transgender voices. And this is in relation to one particular provision in the Act, which is about having to go through a process for getting identity within the binary. Right? So let me just put it briefly that according to the Act, if I want to identify as transgender, that is my prerogative, that is my right. It is the right recognized in the legislation itself. But if I want to be recognized within the gender binary of male or female, then I need to go through a process where the district magistrate has to ascertain whether I have gone through sex reassignment or sex affirmative surgery and gone through the process of becoming a man or a woman. And this became the crucial point of challenge by trans voices around India. And I was with Kolkata Rishta at the time when this happened, and we realized that at that point, where there were these protests and where there was a very clear statement that we should not support this act, that we need to protest against this act, etc., it had not yet been translated to any Indian language other than in English, right? So whose perspectives were those that were that prioritized this particular element of identification and recognition by the state, and in complete disregard of the fact that this is the first time that the Act is recognizing horizontal discrimination. It is recognizing discrimination at the workplace, in public spaces, in education, in health, etc., etc. Right? So the second point of challenge for working class trans discourse and activism is precisely that division between the elite activist, who tends to be upper caste, and the working class community, which is speaking these various languages. So we've gone through this process, very difficult process of translating the entire Act into Bangla at that point. The third point that I'll quickly put out is that we are in a time of erotic nationalism, and this is not limited to India. We're seeing the rise of an aggressive masculinity as the basis of political subjectivity, etc. There's this fixation with the 56-inch chest of the prime minister of this country, etc. And in the Indian context, it goes together with Hindutva. And so what we're seeing over here right now is a complete takeover by the ruling party, the ruling ideology of the entire infrastructure through which transgender welfare is to be disbursed, is to be unfurled, etc. And what that is doing is once again attacking the prevalent idioms, the long-standing idioms. For instance, the identity of Hijra is being replaced by the identity of Kinnar. Kinnar is a Hindu term that comes from Sanskrit and is being included into the infrastructure of formal Hindu practice. And what it's doing is erasing the Hijra identity, which is a syncretic identity, which brings together Islam and various local practices and Hinduism within its cosmology, within its practice, etc., etc. So there are these three directions from which the ability of working class, so to say, subaltern trans discourse is coming under under attack. And I'll stop there. I think there'll be much more in the discussion section of our session today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Akshay. As always, a real pleasure to listen to you. And just some fascinating reflections there, including going back to the kind of recent historical origins of this politics with the HIV industry, kind of entering the scene, the MSM label transmuting into the more recent transition to transgender, and that gaining some respectability and the kind of official registers and language. I particularly I like the points about the binary discourse coming from a Western framing of sexuality, discourse of transition rather than transcendence, beautifully put. I think that was appreciated in the chat line as well. And the whole idea of this kind of oppressive constraints imposed by the need for a performativity of a certain kind of subjectivities around this transitions idea, which leads to erasure of own idioms, local idioms, and people's own ways of being. And the third angle on erotic nationalism, which reminds me of Wilhelm Reich's 1930s or 40s book, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, and the erotic libido that's kind of driving the joining up, the middle classes turning hard right, and the link to Hinduvita ethno-nationalism, which of course is both, it's not so much just ethnic as also culturally religious in a particular Hindu idiom, which takes it beyond India, because the resonances of this with backlash in other places, in other countries, what we tend to see is different kinds of protagonists behind backlash, including religious groupings, including ethno-nationalist interests about racially pure or ethnically pure countries, and also particular kind of conservative capitalist interests, frankly, which are often less visible, sort of behind the scenes, very interested in deglobalization and delinking from financial regulation in particular. But I'll shut up there too. Thank you again very much, and let's open the conversation for people in the audience. I will try to moderate this, so if you would like to speak, please raise your hand, and I will see. I believe that's possible here, isn't it? Yeah, that must be possible on Zoom. Forgive my ignorance. Yeah, we have one hand here. Musa, could you unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Musa Azmi. I'm from Varanasi. My organization name is Asian Bridge India. We recently start working with this LGBT community in Varanasi, and just few months back, we tried to organize the queer walk in Varanasi also. So I just want to share the two experiences in the group. During the queer walk, when we organize the queer walk, there are almost from LGBT community, there are young generation was there, almost more than 100 or 200, more than 150 girls there. But there are guru, gharan that we call here. From the group has their own, Shishanal, they are the kinner or hijra. They came with their own group in front of the hall where we are our starting point. And they don't want us to go for the queer walk. They prevented us. And then we had almost 2-hour discussion with them to understand why we need to have a queer walk. But their obligation is that if you will go and fight with these things and you will go for the rights and dignity and identity of these peoples, then our traditional occupation will be suffered. So they don't want the traditional occupation to be suffered. And that's why they just want there should be male, female, or hijra. No other community they want to recognize it. You have to be with us or without, not or male or female, but none one else. So there was one big things happen. I think that is one of the issue that we need to also see, because in India traditionally there are, maybe Santosh also can explain how traditionally this Badhai system and the Guru and Gharana system was here. So that exists. So there is a big conflict. And the second law here in also create a lot of confusion. Okay.
Okay, your sound is breaking up a little bit, Musa.
Maybe due to some network problem. I hope that, because there is a heavy rain
Musa,
going
can you
outside.
put the video off? Just put the video off. Maybe we can hear you better then.
Yes, I think we got your first point. So if you could recap on the second. Yes, okay, very briefly. I think we had another hand up as well. But
okay. So the act is also create confusion, and that is also need to be properly. We need to create an awareness and try to find out what are the issues that create that the act also created among this community, and then we have to work on it. That's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Musa Azmi. I think we had a hand from Abi, but it came down again. So perhaps that was from Abhinay L. Abhinay L. Yeah. Would you like to make a comment or a question? If so, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. My name is Abhinay. I'm a journalist in India. I just had a question for Akshay. Since they were talking about the onslaught of the right wing in India in certain places on the backlash from the right wing. If you could cite more ways in which this is happening right now, because I would really like to know more about that.
Thank you very much. That's a good, clear question. And so maybe we can then ask panelists to reflect on these questions. Unfortunately, I got the first part of Musa's question from Varanasi about the during a march of resistance to messing essentially with the male gender or hijra categories, and that there's some vested interest in terms of traditional livelihoods here. I sadly missed the second question or point there, but on the last one here from Abhinay, more about the onslaught from the hard right or the Hindutva right in terms of the backlash. I particularly wanted to hear from Akshay on that. But perhaps first then from Santosh or indeed Jashodhara, any thoughts about the resistance to messing with the categories in Varanasi? Have you come across similar issues and dilemmas in your own work in Kolkata or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think on the issue of livelihoods and the hijra community's opposition to the kind of walk, something like a pride walk, I think Musa was saying. Probably Santosh would be best placed to comment on that. I would actually like to understand more Musa's second question, in which Musa said that there is a confusion about what is in the act. Musa, if it is possible for you to type your question in the chat box, then I will try to respond. But I would really ask Santosh to talk about the contradictions between, the hijra's traditional occupation and this notion of transgender. Thanks.
Thank you, Ekar and Yashodhara. Mushkaji, I think, as you know that we are also working, sorry, but I'm very clear over here that as we know that, as we all aware that we are working in the 4 states of India, and UP is one of our states where we are working. So I think there is a communication gap within, because we came to know this letter and we had with the communication with the administrative team. As they said that there was very less participation from the community, and nobody wants to talk from the community over there that what is the pride walk is for. So that is very important, because it's very good that the person from from non-community, sorry, but this word is very important for us to say as a community representative, because as a trans community, we are fighting. And today is a time when we are getting judgment and all, and which is good that as Akshay also mentioned, that some of the elite class people or activists are coming and they are writing our own voices and all, which is good, but which is also very important to give the leadership to them, to make them participatory and to give them the platform, which was not there. And that is what some problems was raised over there, which we came to know very later. So if you are in future, if you are doing anything, I think you have to create a platform for the community rather taking the leadership of the community from them. That is very important. And sorry, this is very important for all of us while we are practicing and academic also, to know the impact of the community also. The first. The second is that I think, which is very important, to understand what is Section 18D as per the NALSA judgment mean for transgender protection rights. As you said, Badhai and all, see, Badhai is from the livelihood of Hijra tradition. Okay, na? But there are many other traditions, not other livelihood things is also happening, like challa, like sex work, like many other things. So as from the non-community participants, or the academic or anything, those who are not from our community, I am requesting them to please come interaction with the community, please sit with the community, day by day talk with the community, and that will help us to understand the real meaning of transgender or Hijra community or Kinnar community, whatever we want to say. But that will be only happen when we can involve them in real, but not in that something like an abstract way. So thank you very much. The letter, definitely, if any questions comes, I will try to give the answer.
So thank you very much, Santosh. Great to have your perspective and about process and participation and giving platform and voice to the community and engaging in listening. I know we have a hand up from Rahul Mitra, but we're still about to hear from Akshay as well on the last questions here. If anybody who is, Rahul, if you could mute your microphone, because we're going to hear from Akshay first. So thank you. We will come back to you, but I'll give Akshay the floor now to respond to Musa's questions and Abhina in particular as well, from journalism, in terms of the onslaught from the right. Can we hear a bit more on that? And Musa, we'll come back to you, Rahul first, and then back to Musa. So over to you, Akshay.
I think Musa's question is extremely important, and I followed the Banaras Pride Walk situation from a distance. But I think Santosh's point is, is on the dot in terms of, activism must be community-led, not simply participatory. It has to be community-led. But at the same time, what Musa is pointing to resonates with a challenge which is taking place all around this country. And I'm talking about, my experience of working with trans groups in different parts of the country, where there is a conflict between the language and discourse and activism of transgender vis-a-vis Hijra, right? And there's a complex history to this. I'll just very briefly talk about how the Hijra Gharana structure has functioned as a modality of social security. You will very rarely see a Hijra person living on the streets. The reason is that the community is structured as a form of taxation, actually, right? So if I'm a Hijra and I'm doing doing badhai or challa, etc. How much ever I earn in a given day, a certain amount has to go to my guru. And whatever my guru collects in a given day, a certain amount goes to her guru, etc., right? And there's a long history of conversation around the exploitation within that structure. So we have a traditional structure of social security, which is now being seen as exploitative, and that's true to a large extent. Transgender is an entry into regular citizenship, into the realm of normality, and the hijra in that context is reduced to a livelihood rather than gender identity. So there's conflict over there, and for the large part, people who identify as transgender are people who've left the hijra structure, right? On the promise of getting regular jobs, on the promise of inclusion, right? This becomes a problem when we realize that actually the welfare state in this country is collapsing, right? And the promise of capitalism is failing not just the marginalized, but the mainstream as well. So the dilemma is, do we oppose the hijra gharana structure on the basis of the hope that we will be included and we will have welfare, right? Or do we work with the gharana structure and somehow bring together a strategy to come up with new modes of social security which are not exploitative? And this is a challenge that I think transgender and hijra groups around the country are facing. To respond to Abhinay, of course, this can be a very long conversation about the right-wing backlash, etc. I'll just highlight two elements over here. One is what I was talking about, the erasure of hijra and its displacement by the Kinnar. Recently there has been the recognition of the Kinnar Akhada, right, which is part of that the formal structure of Hinduism. It's not coincidental that the chief of that religious group, right, is also the chairperson of the national committee that has been set up for the implementation of the Transgender Act, and almost everyone on that committee is her chela or is in one way or the other, subscribing to that particular ideology. That's one instance. And on the other hand, you have the rise of what we've known as homo nationalism for quite some time. Right from its inception, there has been a strong Hindutvavadi line, which is an upper caste kind of line within LGBT politics in India. And those groups tend to draw most of the resources that are coming in from international development funding, etc. And the spokespeople for these groups and the figures that head these groups tend to be brutally Islamophobic in their public performance, and create the idea of the good Hindu gay as the ideal queer citizen. So it brings queer politics into the work of Islamophobia, of Hindu nationalism or ethnic nationalism, however you want to look at it. I'll stop there, but there's many other elements to be recognized in response to Abhinay's question.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay. And that last point about the entanglements of what's been referred to as pinkwashing in kind of homo nationalism is not unusual in many settings, but it's getting very entangled and complicated in backlash politics. So thank you very much. I saw Musa, you had your hand up a little bit earlier. I don't know whether that's to respond to any of these points.
For understanding my question by Akshay, thank you. It's true. That's the things that are happening. And just response to Santoshji, actually there is a Banaskur collective was organized by the group of community people led by Niti. So they are the one who is leading. The community itself is the leading the queer walk. But this clash was happened. But that is true. The Santosh ji suggestion was good. We need to sit with them to have a long conversation and discussion to understand the whole issue and the pride, and then we can go move forward. So that is true. And we are also running the alternative livelihood program for these people in Varanasi. So I hope maybe next time we can share those experiences as well.
Great, thank you, Musa. And it sounds like good work in Varanasi. Great to hear that those messages from Santosh and Akshay and Jashudra have come through clearly, because they make a lot of sense. So let's hear from Rahul Mitra. Did you have a question or a reflect, comment? There is feedback on your line, so I will try to maybe turn down the volume a little bit. There is a lot of feedback.
Am I audible? My name is Rahul Mitra. I am a trans man from West Bengal. We run an organization named TSER. So this is the first organization run by the trans man. When we talk about the transgender, always we talk about M to F, female to male. Nobody mention about male to female. Most of the time we are getting hide under the transgender word. So I would like to try to highlight on ourselves, female to male, biologically female, but their soul or gender is male. So I want to suggestion that we know okay, Transgender Act is implied, but in West Bengal, we don't get a TG certificate. Reason is invisible, because okay, the DM are giving, they don't clear anything. In April, I was apply for TG certificate. Till now, I am not getting any answer from DM. As well as I also mailed to Ministry of Social Justice. They also mailed the DM, but nobody giving us any right answer why they don't issue any TG certificate in West Bengal. So our condition is like football. When I talk to a national forum, they reply, you contact with your CM or any ministry. It's not possible we contact with CM. So what to do now? Because we know if I talk about the transgender female, they can run their livelihood via hijra live, or any begging profession or any dance profession. But the trans men, they don't have any way for earning, because they are biologically female, and nobody recognize us as a transgender. But society tag us as a hijra.
Huh?
We are
Okay.
we are tagging by name hijra, but we don't earn from this side. So the condition is the trans man community is deprived, and most of the time they are like they don't have any livelihood way what to do. So many, as a senior trans man, I face many problems. At the same time, junior trans men ask me every time, and they call me, they WhatsApp me, what to do. We don't get any TG certificate. Now we are not applying any scholarship of program or any transgender health card, Ayushman Bharat, where we are getting free surgery. So that's why we are facing very many problems. And we know state government and central government in clash, we are facing problem, as well as Santosh ji already said. So in that time, how we overcome this problem, and how to we means trans man community came out, and we also want everybody talk about us, and sitting about us, and listening about us. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Rahul. That's a really interesting and obviously urgent perspective and appeal from.
One thing I will add. Want to add.
Okay, quickly.
Biologically, we are female, so society and family we treated us as a female. So we are as a female all time. Their gender disbalance. We are facing problem, and adding is our gender identity is adding. So we face double problem. Like we facing a female problem as well as we facing as a trans man problem. So we are very in
yes
confusion.
Okay, we hear you loud and clear, I think. And if I could thank you for that perspective, maybe I could hand over to Santosh first, and perhaps Akshay later, because these are difficult questions around categories and some of the points that Akshay also mentioned around transition rather than transcendence. So what do we do with transition when transition is still an issue for people? So Santosh, first from you. You got recommendations and
I 110% agree with Rahul. This is a problem which we all trans people are facing for ID card and all. We did we are having lot of dialogue with both the governments. We already applied more than 300 transgenders to get the identity card, but not a single card has been issued from the central government. Why? Just because of this, we don't have that collector or DM in our city, in Calcutta mainly. And I do agree, 110% agree with my brother Rahul, that this is a problem. But as a trans community, we always want to talk about transgender, irrespective of any male or female, because this is a platform for trans, and trans means trans. It's not that only male to female or female to male. We have to cover each and every, and we have to bring together each and every transgender people. And there is nothing to be added from my side, but yes, again, I'm saying I'm agree with him. And I appreciate that in this platform, he raised this voice, which is really going to be the something very concrete as well as very innovative in future. Thank you, Rahul, for putting this point. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Santosh, for that call for unity as well. Just it's very challenging in terms of what we've heard in this politics, because there's also division to some extent. The power relations involved in these politics create division, and how do we, and the issues around transition, calling for attention from different corners and identities, we risk ending up in a politics of what Kimberly Crenshaw, I think it was, termed an Olympics of the oppressed. And how do we transcend rather than get divided by priorities of transition, whose transitions really count? So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Akshay and reflect on that. What do we do about the fact that transition is still an issue, and it's not, if it's not seen or valued for trans women, male to female, what about the even more invisible female to male trans community? Over to you, Akshay.
Yeah, I think there are several points, to be recognized in response to Rahul's, I think, very important intervention. The first is recognizing that actually there are very different sets of issues and problems that differently placed people have, whether it be in terms of trans men, trans women, it'd be about third gender, it'd be about queer, etc., etc. We are kind of, that's one of the problems with the Trans Act, is it puts us all together as though we are a singular kind of entity. And in that context, then the culturally most intelligible form, which is the trans woman, or rather, which is actually the hijra, comes to become the framework through which all other communities, all other experiences are understood and addressed. And of course, there's historical reasons why, especially to do with the HIV/AIDS interventions, right? That Kotis and Hijras, etc., have had a much longer experience of engaging and advocating with the state. Even with the COVID crisis, for instance, where mainstream society was struggling to get hospital beds, it was slightly easier in some parts of the country for trans people to get beds because we already knew how to negotiate the public health system because of our long-standing battle with the public healthcare system arising from the HIV/AIDS context. So there's a historical context to be understood in terms of the unequal access to the new form of governmental recognition, etc. There's one more thing I want to share, which is from some of the work that I'm doing in with community groups in Karnataka, where the mechanisms for getting these transgender cards are just being set up. Right? We need and the places where people have been successful in getting the transgender cards are places where there is a longer history of local activism, right? Where people have for a longer period of time been engaging with the state. So it is those local community groups that are able to negotiate with the district magistrate or with the state machinery, etc. This brings us to the urgent need for community level organizing to be upscaled across the country. What this means is establishing mechanisms of social accountability. We need to be able to have those mechanisms where a community is able to negotiate, is able to be the watchdog as to the implementation of those welfare schemes, etc. And this is not an easy job. It requires us to be able to put in place deliberative democratic practices, horizontal democratic practices within communities and in communities which are ridden with hierarchies owing from the Gharana system, etc. This is quite a bit of a challenge. So for me, the manifesto for now is to establish deliberative democratic practices and mechanisms locally all around the country, which then gives way to mechanisms of social accountability, where the district magistrate, the state machinery is being held to account on a regular basis, every year or 2 years, kind of a report card, an audit of what the state has done, etc., and whether the work of the state has been equitably focused on the various communities that are being worked with. So I hear Rahul's point as a call to action for community groups across the country to put in place horizontal democratic practices and social accountability.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Akshay. That's great perspectives. Maybe a little later, I'd like to ask around making these linkages between.
I want to say something.
Rahul.
One of the district magistrate told state secretary give him verbal notice, don't issue any TG certificate. Reason, rules is not making TG certificate, TG Act rules is not making. So you don't issue any certificate. Don't give him any written notice. They just verbal notice. So in that case, if the state government or any state officials give any advice or notice, a verbal notice to the district magistrate, don't issue any TG certificate. In that case, if advocacy, any social, any advocacy program we are doing with DM, so it's not working. So in that case, what to do?
Okay, so thank you, Rahul. I really hear your desperation, frankly, because this is a huge challenge. And my question to kind of action all of us is going to be if we can then kind of link this back to the bigger question of the kind of hard backlash that extends beyond sexuality and identity and touches the lives of communities in so many ways. But before that, I'd like to ask just Shudra to come in here and reflect a little bit. Saw your hand up a little bit earlier.
Thank you, Yerker. I just wanted to respond also for respond to the issues that Rahul is raising and Santosh has also echoed. And from what I can make out, the Transgender Act was actually passed in December 2019, and the rules to put the act into practice was passed in September 2020. And in the rules, it was written that the procedure for issuing the transgender identity card, separate wards in jails, in hospitals, in shelter homes, separate washrooms for those who are neither women nor men. Then the whole thing about having an equal opportunity policy in all institutions, something along the lines of the legally mandated prevention of sexual harassment, the POSH policy, which is now absolutely mandatory in every single institution. There is supposed to be an equal opportunity policy, which is for gender equality. And the third aspect, which is really crucial for the protection of rights, is the setting up of transgender protection cells in every single district, in which there has to be the head of the police department and the district magistrate have to work together to ensure that all transgender rights are protected. Now, these three key dimensions were supposed to have been implemented within 2 years of passing the rules. So actually, we are today in September 2022. We are exactly 2 years from the time when the government has promised to do these things, set up transgender protection cells in every district, set up equal opportunity policies in every single institution, including educational institutions, and provide segregated and separate infrastructure like washrooms and separate wards, etc. I don't know if anybody has tried checking. There are many activists listening to us today, but to my knowledge, none of these have actually been implemented, even though it was mandated by law. And I think here a very important question that comes up is the material basis for transforming rights into realizable entitlements. And here, I think the importance of resourcing rights has to come up. Because in the whole overall, I think, political economy, a marginalized, a sort of minority group like the transgender community doesn't really count politically. And so no resources have been allocated across most of the states. I don't think the central government has allocated any budget for implementing the law and the rules. And so overall, there is this apathy, which can only be addressed if there is a strong community-based voice, campaigning, and movement calling for accountability, the way that Akshay is bringing out. And I just want to flag the question of this identity card, because entitlements are really important for working class transgender persons. Simple things like having access to the public distribution system that enables you to get free grains at a time when you might be struggling with your livelihood. During COVID, we found people starving because there was no livelihood. Sex work was not possible. And we found actually people committing suicide or people just dying. And just the fact that they did not have the identity prevented them from accessing public entitlements like the free ration scheme or any other scheme like the health scheme that Rahul mentioned and so on. So I think to bring the conversation back to the working class transgender, the issue of entitlements is linked to the issue of identity. And the issue of identity in our country is very much linked to the question of you having a permanent address. And a lot of trans persons have to actually leave their birth families because of torture and because of oppression. So they don't have a permanent address. I think it's all very much part of the governmentality of how you identify a category, how you kind of tie them in with conditionalities, and then how finally you deny them their entitlements so that the state can carry on with business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Jashodhara. Yes, you mentioned class, and it makes me think back to the actress points about the importance of long-term engaged local activism and engaging with government locally, as well as with movements. And issues have also come up around splits between different movements. So you could say female to male trans community not being recognized by other queer communities, perhaps. There's also, having mentioned class and livelihoods and framed this entire discussion in that context, as opposed to what actually referred to as the higher castes kind of pinkwashing of queer issues. How do we connect this to the national and global politics? And that sounds like an impossible task in a way, but somewhere, and of course, the global politics is not something that most of us can do very much about practically. But what does it mean in terms of the national politics, and in particular, perhaps, connections between movements? What does this mean in relation between sexual rights and women's rights movements, or workers' movements, etc.? Is that something that we can contemplate the practicality of, and what direction should we be taking? How do we engage with feminists or women's rights feminists, and this whole plethora of organizations who engage men and boys in gender justice and social justice? Of course, Jashodhara works for one organization that explicitly does this. What do we have to say about that? How do we engage with other social movements for social justice here in relation to national politics? Anyone would like to have a pop at that?
I actually see a lot of my feminist colleagues here on this call. Vanita, Sunita, Susie. Would any of you want to jump in here and speak about how feminist movements see themselves vis-a-vis trans struggles?
Yes, the floor is open. Please raise your hands if you'd like, and don't feel shy. This is experimental, as was pointed out by Sunita, I think, was earlier. So, anybody would like to come in? Okay.
I also request, Sunita, if you can add your, what I'll say, but I know you as my friend, so you can also share the journey and things, and which is really helping us to be understand other feminist movement issues.
Okay, I mean, some people will feel more comfortable to have the conversation in the chat line. Others of us find it more difficult to sort of switch between the two realities.
Okay, so I'll just put in a couple of thoughts here, Yerker, but I really hope my feminist colleagues here will also bring in their perspective. I think for a long time, we were stuck in what Akshay was calling the struggle of the binary. Like, are you a trans woman? Are you a trans man? Are you a trans woman who was a man and has not actually gone through the struggles of, adolescent girlhood, et cetera, Are you an authentic woman? Are you not an authentic woman, etc.? I think the binary really trapped a lot of the discourse and prevented it from going into this, what Akshay called the gender transcendent way of looking at, gender fluidity. And beyond this, are you heterosexual, are you not, etc. And the question of identity was also important because of the class character of the leadership of the LGBTIQ movements, where questions of identity, questions of choice, questions of privacy were important. But now I think that's slowly changing, and especially in the context of working class transgender. If I speak personally, I see them as another vulnerable social group, which, COVID has really brought this out to all of us, but even before that, it's another vulnerable social group which is struggling to claim its, citizenship rights vis-a-vis a state which is retreating from that role of providing and moving totally into a role of policing. This is where I think it's important for social movements to build solidarity with socially, economically vulnerable groups like the transgender community, who are really becoming more and more at the margins of everything. But it's also important for us to go beyond just, assessing and examining, are you an authentic feminist? Have you gone through the kind of struggles women have gone through all their lives? Do you actually stand by the principles that we as feminists espouse? I think those are the questions where we have to, try and make some progress, create a little more space for unexpected conversations. So this is a provocation. I'm hoping someone in the audience will respond.
Thank you, Jashodhara. And until and unless somebody in the audience does respond, I would like to. I think this conversation is amazing. And oh, Vanita, did you want to come in? Please do.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Thank you. Let me speak from a very personal kind of a perspective. As someone who's a part of the feminist movement from 1982, which is like decades ago, where we were so thrilled to get a conceptual framework to understand what oppresses women. And, the binary was so important that time, and then say 2 decades on, we had to really rethink a lot of our own assumptions about this binary. And I think for me, it's a whole journey of gratitude in terms of acknowledging the transgender community that brought to our notice about the kind of layered complexities about identity. And, and somehow, you see, those who have got a gospel of binary and, a kind of a way of understanding your oppression, it really takes you out into a situation of really struggling to now grapple again, revisit all your conceptual frameworks again. And for that, I think the feminist movement really has learned a lot about the whole broadening, shaping, and complexifying identity issues. So that's one thing. Now the other part is about, there has been some in the feminist movement who have actually, go back to questioning certain things like, there is a kind of a possessive thing about gender as something that was, a framework that the feminist movement created when they were grappling and there was no language it was a problem without a name. At the same time, you know, it kind of harks back to what Yashodhara said about, you know, the struggles you go through as a woman, which is very specifically as a woman, and therefore you're always trying to understand and build solidarities with that kind of struggles. And I think our big leap would be to begin to create those kind of solidarities with all the range, the ranges of what we call under the rubric of the transgender community, which is, I know, not fair because there's so many colors and textures to it. So maybe that is our challenge. And that's something that even I often struggle with, you know, because I mean, there is something about going through a biological experience also that defines you as a person. And I don't know how we, what are the kind of platforms or our experiential things on which we build those solidarities without acrimony. Because I think sometimes I've seen these debates getting very acrimonious, and I think that is our challenge.
Okay, yeah. So thank you so much, Vanita. We are actually running out of time now. And we have a hand up from Veena. If you could do it in a minute or two, can we hear from you, Veena?
Sure. Thank you. It's a very enlightening experience. From my point, I would think that we need to just look at nurturing relationship with everybody across humanity, because we could make a lot of segments, we could make a lot of divisions, but that does not define a thing. The fact that we are all human and we need to nurture each other's into getting into what they aspire in life would make world very beautiful. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Veena. I think that is a great way to end. And I will just throw in a quick word. First of all, thank you so much, all of our guests here, Yashodhara, Akshay, and Santosh. And also on this final debate, I'd like to propose that a way of transcending issues of identity and divisions caused in this gendered politics. We could change the frame, both thinking about inclusivity and nurturing and openness in that, but also changing the frame of analysis upwards and looking at patriarchy. We don't have time for this now, but if we start to undress patriarchy and think of it as not as a monolithic system that locks us down every day, we're all implicated in patriarchy in various ways. And it is evolving. I believe the current major sort of hard backlash is a response to crises, and that it's a moment in history of patriarchal relations being reset and renegotiated. And if we all think about this politics in terms of patriarchal politics, we can have a way of framing problems which don't divide us by identity as much. But it is always also intersectional, of course. So as patriarchy evolves, it will evolve in terms of in racialized and classed forms. But on that note, I think we need to wrap up and thank all our participants. And we will all go away and watch these videos again if we haven't seen them. So thank you all. Any last words from our guests?
No, just thank you to everyone for the engaging discussions.
Thank you, Yashodhara.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's good when we end something with questions rather than answers. I think that's a great way to bring it
and
together.
I hope, this is Vanita, I hope you can continue this, because I feel I have a lot to learn and relearn. And I think these kind of discussion really helps to understand a little more.
And it's wonderful to see so many familiar names and sometimes faces in the participant lists. And we will be continuing to run seminars in the program. So watch out for that. Visit our website, counteringbacklash.org.